Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sambucci. It is the continuation of our Go Farther podcast series. So I'm excited to jump in to today's episode. I am recording this from a hotel down in Palo Alto. Drove down here last night for a workshop I'm running today. So I don't have my usual setup here. So the light's a little off. The room's a little bit different than I'm used to. So hopefully the audio is fine because it's the only thing you probably care about. So today's episode we're going to talk about with the Go Farther series is schedule everything. Schedule everything. So just as for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time on an episode, the concept here that we're talking about with Go Farther is the idea of like, how do we all do more? How do we be happy? And how do we surprise ourselves? Do more, be happy, surprise yourself. This is a concept that I developed over the last been probably 7, 8 years. And the idea of Go Farther really comes around from the concept of my endurance racing around ultra marathons, triathlons, and those sorts of things. And so what I found is that as you're trying to do more things, you're trying to go farther, in my case, like quite literally in terms of mileage, trying to go from 50 miles to 100 miles to 200 miles and so on. There's things that we need to do in order to go farther. And in order to go farther, we want to do more. But we also want to make sure that we're happy doing it, right? We shouldn't just go farther because we can. We should be doing it in a joyful way, in a way that is meaningful for ourselves. And ultimately, if we do those things, then that's where we have the opportunity to surprise ourselves. And that's the thing that I sort of live on when it comes to running a race or doing work with my business or doing things at home with my family. Is how do I just do a little bit more? How do I go a little bit farther in a way that surprises even myself to say, like, wow, I didn't know I could do those things. So this episode today, we're going to talk about schedule everything, schedule everything. And so the concept here starts with, I think all of us, if you're the kind of person listening to the show, let's face it, you're ambitious. Like you got a lot of things that you want to do. We're trying to balance our work. We're trying to balance our life. We're trying to balance ourselves and our health. We might be balancing both the planned activities and any unplanned activities that might pop up, both good and bad. And then, ultimately, at least for me, when it comes to the ambition that I have and all of the different projects that I take on and all the things I want to do, it's easy to feel like the rabbit and in Alice in Wonderland that's looking at the pocket watch and saying, I'm late, I'm late, oh my, I'm late. So I think that probably rings true for a lot of us because behind all of that, I think the concept or the underlying fear is like I don't have enough time. I'm never going to have enough time to do the things that I want to do. So where we want to be is a place where we're making time for what's most important. We're making time. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, making time, not finding time in just a couple minutes. We want to be able to focus on the top priority that's in front of us in that moment, in that day, in that week, in that month, whatever that is. And we also want to have, at least for me, I want to know that there's a sense of calmness around my day or my week because I've got things scheduled, I've got things partitioned out. There's a sense of balance of how I'm going to approach a day, even if like a day like today where I get up at 4, I do my morning pages, I'm recording this podcast at 5:30 in the morning, then I've got several meetings back to back that I'm running on Zoom before I head over to run the workshop at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm going to drive home, do a couple calls while I'm in the car, do a little more work in the afternoon, and then go to jiu-jitsu tonight. So it's like it's a super long day that starts at 4 in the morning. It's going to finish up at 9 o'clock at night. And pretty much every hour, every minute of my day is stacked with something. However, I can go into the day when I first wake up, and even as I'm recording this, and don't have a sense of stress about it because I know what's in front of me because I know exactly what needs to be done and when it's going to be done every day. And ultimately, what this allows us to do is just get shit done. I mean, that's the simple part of it is we have those big lofty ambitions and we want to get hard things done. And to do the hard things, we have to do the day-to-day things. And sometimes that is some difficult things or sometimes it's fun things, but either way, we got to get those things done, those tasks in order to get to where we want to go. So as we dive into this, I was thinking back about like, how did I get to a place for me where I am scheduling everything? And just again, as a reminder for those of you who have been listening to multiple episodes, everything that I share here obviously is going to come from personal experience. Occasionally, I might bring in some stuff that I'm doing with clients or things that clients are doing with us when we're here at Sales Qualia and our coaching programs and the consulting work that we do. And it's really just me sharing my personal experience such that that perhaps there's something here that I'm sharing that you say, wow, okay, that's a really good idea. I can take that and adopt it and just basically take it, make it my own. Or I can take it and adapt it and adjust it. I can take the concept of what I might be sharing with you here, and then you can adjust it or adapt it to your situation. I feel really strongly about helping people like you, helping anyone that listens to this podcast or watches videos or anyone that comes to our coaching program. I mean, the kind of person that's looking to get ideas, to look for strategies, to look for systems, to look for skills is the kind of person that wants to do more. They want to ultimately be happy. They want to surprise themselves. They want to go farther. And that's the purpose for me sitting down, documenting these ideas in the form of a podcast or a video if you're watching on YouTube, so that hopefully there's something here that might be helpful for you. Okay, so the background on this, I've always, I guess, been generally pretty organized. I mentioned in the last episode around planning and preparing. My dad was an accountant. He's like a checklist guy. He kind of taught me, if you got stuff to do, write it down, make a list, all of those things. Ultimately, I think where some places where I started to kind of for myself realize where this was going to be important to schedule everything. First in high school. So in high school, I was taking honors classes and advanced placement classes. So I had a pretty tough, relatively speaking, academic schedule. And then on top of that, I was playing soccer for the 4 years I was in high school. So playing varsity soccer, there's practices every day after school from 3 to 6. And then, if there's games at night, you'd go home, they'd have to do homework and then go back to school. And then we catch a bus at 4 to go get to the game by 6 and then come home at night by 9 p.m. And sometimes there'd still be more homework or projects to do. And then on the weekends, I was working at a restaurant. I was bussing tables and waiting tables in order to save money for college. And then I had social life too, right? I, hang out with friends on the weekends, go to movies, play tennis, girlfriend, those kinds of things. So trying to balance a lot of stuff in high school, I think was a really good training ground for me to start to figure out, like, how am I going to fit all of this stuff in if I've got projects due and term papers due, and I've got, 3 soccer matches that week, 2 of which might be traveling. So I'm getting home late and then I got to work on the weekends. It's just a lot of stuff. So it helped to train me to start figuring out how to compartmentalize and make sure that I'm scheduling when each thing is happening and I can get things done. Fast forward a little bit into college, in particular in my senior year, that's where I should really remember this moment where I was out with some friends. We had this golf course at our school. I went to undergraduate school at a place called Winthrop University down in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And they had this, air quotes golf course. We used to call it the Goat Ranch. It was just basically, yes, it was a golf course, but they really didn't keep it up very well. Basically, it was like 9 holes in the ground with a flag, and you just, you'd hit the ball towards it and you'd play golf, but it was definitely nothing spectacular. They didn't even charge. You just go out there and play totally for free. And so we used to go out there sometimes, and there's a 9-hole course, so we used to play 9 holes just as a way to get out and take a break from stuff. And I remember in one particular day, I was standing there and it was my turn to hit and on the tee. And I turned to my friends that was with me, and I don't know where this came from, but I just looked at them and I said, man, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I think it was in that moment where I realized, okay, I'm a history major, which I basically was a history major out of convenience. I had advanced placement credits coming in history. So it accelerated, and it reduced the number of classes I had to take. Classes were pretty easy for me because all you're doing is basically going to lecture, you're reading, and then you're doing essays. And that's like super easy for me. No classes on Friday in most cases, because most of the classes are Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So it's like a 4-day work week in a sense. So that was pretty simple. But I didn't really have any business background. I didn't have any prospects for a job. For a little while, I was a secondary education minor, meaning I could go and get a job teaching in high school. But I decided that wasn't the thing I wanted to do. So I didn't even have that to fall on. It's like, if you're a history major, what are you going to do? Go work in a museum? I mean, there was really not a lot of jobs for history majors. And so it all kind of hit me in that moment. I'm like, God, what am I going to do with my life? And so I decided to go down to the Career Development Center and just talk to them about, can I get some kind of internship? I need to get some business experience. And this guy, Tom and Jay Chuck, I still remember him. And I even DM'd him on LinkedIn not too long ago just to say hi. And I told him my situation. He's like, no, look, man, we're going to figure something out for you. I ended up getting an internship at John Deere Company up in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was only about a 20-minute drive from where I was. And so my senior year, second semester, I got really busy with stuff, right? I'm trying to finish out my classes. I was working at Applebee's waiting tables and basically working about 20 hours a week, working multiple shifts, sometimes double shifts on the weekend, working late nights because it would stay open until midnight, I think, or later. So I was doing the John Deere internships. I would go up to Charlotte 3 days a week, basically from like 8 to 11 in the morning. So I'd have those, and then I'd have my classes, and then I had the work I was doing at Applebee's. I was pretty active in the fraternity that I was in. So, all the social stuff. In my senior year, we had to do what were called culture credits. You're supposed to go to like 21 cultural events throughout the course of your 4 years. And of course, nobody does a couple a year like you're supposed to. So now you're cramming to get those in. And that's when I picked up one of those little daily organizers and I just started writing stuff down. And it was really, really helpful for me. The third place where this kind of like created some background for me was when I had my first couple of jobs out of college. My first job out of college was selling cabinet doors. I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode. I was basically driving around North Carolina and talking to cabinet door manufacturers to see if they wanted to buy the cabinet doors because that was kind of a specialty thing to produce. But more so when I got my first, what I call my real sales job, when I was a college textbook salesperson with Prentice Hall, that's where really this idea of schedule everything hit home for me. I didn't call it schedule everything back then, but because of the way the territory is set up, I had 21 college campuses in Western North Carolina that I was responsible for selling to across I think it was 5 or 6 different departments. So I had to sell to business departments, technology departments, science, math, engineering. So a lot of different departments at each of those schools. And some of the schools were pretty big. UNC Charlotte, Appalachian State, for example, a couple of community colleges, he has like 20, 30,000 students. These are really big campuses where I had to figure out, okay, which professors are using which textbooks and what courses are they teaching next year. And then I go to campus and the goal was always to get 20 touches in a day, meaning I had 20 visits or 20 touches to the professors that were our prospects. And so go to campus, you have to figure out office hours. One of the professors going to be in their office on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Monday and a Wednesday. Are they in their office from 11 to 12 for office hours? Because that would be the best time to try to catch them. And then I had to figure out committees and we had decision deadlines because you basically could only sell from January to May because by May they would have to make their decision on what college textbooks they'd be using for the next year. So you had a lot of timeline crunch. You had multiple campuses, multiple departments, a lot of committees. And so it just took a lot of structure and a lot of scheduling in order to figure out like when I was going to hit each professor and each committee at each campus in that 5-month window, because it wasn't like this infinite timeline at a cabinet door manufacturer where you could just like, oh yeah, stop by in 3 weeks and maybe I'll have an order for you. So all of those things kind of helped to train me to be structured in my scheduling, going back to my childhood. And that all kind of helped accelerate for me when I got into business life. So what I want to do now is talk about a couple of examples from ultra running, where this idea of schedule everything also really has hit home for me in the last 10 or 15 years. Then I want to talk about a couple of work examples. And of course, we're going to wrap up. I've got 5 specific strategies around this concept of schedule everything so that you can do more, be happy, and surprise yourself. Before I get into a couple of examples from my ultra running endurance racing, I want to remind you, please, 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 it's a big request. If you are not yet following the show on your favorite podcast player, please do click that follow button. If this was an episode that's forwarded to you, or maybe you found it on a LinkedIn post or somewhere else, please do follow the show. We're running these episodes every week. I've been really consistent about it, making sure they're coming out on time at the same time every single week so that you can get into a habit and into a routine. So I want to make sure that every week as I'm sharing these ideas around the Go Farther series and a bunch of other new content that I've got coming down the road in the rest of this year plus years to come, that you make sure that you know exactly when those new episodes are ready. Number 2, please do like and comment on any post that you see about these shows. It helps us to spread the word. And then also leave a review, leave a comment in your podcast player. Let us know what you like about this, what ideas you have for us. If you have any guests that you'd like to recommend for us down the road on any of the types of topics that we talk about in this podcast, please let me know. All of those things help us boost the rankings on this podcast. It helps us get jazzed up and it helps me stay motivated, stay focused, knowing that more and more people are listening to the show every week. So please do that for us. The best way for podcasts to grow is word of mouth, which means your mouth. So the more that your mouth tells other people about this show, the better it is for us. So that is my request from you. Okay. So let's get into a couple examples of ultra marathon endurance racing and this idea of schedule everything. So I think most importantly, it comes to the training calendar. So with the kinds of races that I've been doing over the last 10 or 15 years, think about an Ironman triathlon. So you're training in swimming, you're training in biking, you're training in running. So you've got multiple sports that you're training for. And frequently you're doing two a days, meaning that you might swim in the morning and then run in the afternoon. Or a very common workout would be do a long bike ride, maybe 4 or 5, 6 hour bike ride that's anywhere from say 50 to 100 miles. And then when you get back, then you immediately change into your running gear and then just do a 3 or 5 mile run because you need to get that adjustment, feel that adjustment from running to biking or from biking to running because your legs are going to feel really tired. You're using different muscles and all of those things. So you've got a lot of these different days where you're doing multiple training and you're probably training in most cases 5 to at least 5, probably 6 days a week with a rest day in there. And even that rest day, you might be doing like a short swim or like a run jog just to kind of stay loose and make sure you're staying active. And then when it comes to the ultra running, I've worked with coaches both in triathlon. I worked with a guy named Kevin Cody, who was my triathlon coach for a couple of years. And then in running, I've worked with Jeff Browning. And in both cases, right, they're giving you workouts to do and usually around a 3 week cycle. So typically when you're doing endurance racing, one of the common methodologies is to do what we call a build period. So you do kind of a build period for 3 weeks and then you back off a little bit for a week and then you build for 3 weeks and then you back off for a week. And it just allows your body to get accustomed to going farther, quite literally, ramping up your mileage in the bike and the run, ramping up your mileage if you're just doing the running, ramping up your yards in the pool on a given workout and over time. And so trying to fit all of these things in, right? You have to schedule everything. Many times, especially I remember when I was, more running these longer races, whether it was the Western States 100 or the other hundreds I've run or the Tahoe 200, there are weeks where I'm like, my training time is 15 to 20 hours per week. That's like my moving time. So you think about if I'm doing 5 runs in a week, I might do, two shorter 5 mile runs. I might do two medium distance 7 to 10 mile runs. And then I'm going to do one really long run, maybe 20 to 30 miles. Right. So in that kind of week, you're running, anywhere from 50 to 70 miles. So just adding up those minutes alone that you're on the trail, you're out running, it's a lot of time. Not to mention the driving. If you're driving to a trail, plus recovery, you're setting up your gear, you're tearing down your gear, you're showering when you're done, you're getting some food, all of those things, right? It becomes really a part-time job and almost feels like a second full-time job in a lot of ways. And so it's really, really critical that to get all of that training in, it becomes a key piece of what is like, when and where am I going to train? So especially when I was training triathlons, this game got really tough when I was traveling. So I used to travel more frequently for work when I was doing triathlons. When I was at Altos Research and CoreLogic, I do a lot of traveling. And so if I'm driving, traveling down to Dallas and I'm in Dallas for 3 or 4 days in a row, well, in those 3 or 4 days, I might need to get a couple of swims in. Well, where am I going to swim? Because the hotels don't usually have lap pools. And so now I'm calling gyms and finding out who's got a pool and who, can I get a guest pass? Or I remember calling a gym in Dallas and saying, look, man, I got to do a 3 hour bike ride. Can I get into your gym and use the spin bike for a couple of hours in the morning? And one guy said, well, look, we open at 6 in the morning. And I was like, well, crap, I got a meeting at like 8:30. I said, is there any chance I can get there earlier? And he said, well, usually actually get to the gym at 5. If you want to come early, I'll just let you in. I was like, whoa, that was awesome. So it's like kind of amazing what you can get when you ask for it. And so I like went to this gym at 5 in the morning. He opened up the door for me. I spent 3 hours on a spin bike to get that 3 hour ride in so I can get back to the hotel, get showered in time to get to that 8:30 breakfast meeting. So like, this is what you have to do if you're serious about this kind of endurance racing to make sure you fit everything in. So that became a key part of this idea of scheduling everything, getting all these different training times and training blocks and types of training into the calendar to make sure that you got the mileage that you need to get done in order to be ready. The second part of this is then, of course, they're not just weaving it into the work schedule and any travel, but now I'm weaving it into my personal life. So if I'm trying to figure out like, when am I going to be doing the long run? Well, if I'm doing a long run on Saturday morning and I'm going to head out to the trail, I'm leaving the house at 5 in the morning. I'm not going to be home until 2 in the afternoon. Well, I've got to schedule that time. I got to talk to my wife. Okay, is Saturday a good day or should I go on Sunday? What do you have going on this weekend? What plans do we have as a family? So that becomes a big part of weaving it all into the work and the personal life. And then ultimately, it's just adding everything else into the calendar on the personal side. So it's not just the training stuff, but I coach soccer. So now I got to do 3 practices a week in most weeks. We've got games on the weekend. I'm scheduling in, is it a home game? Is it a away game? If we're driving an hour to get to another game and we get to the field an hour early, then a 3 o'clock games means leaving the house at 1. Then the game runs from 3 to roughly 4:15, 4:30, and then we're driving home. So I'm leaving the house at 1 in the afternoon on a Saturday. I'm getting home at 6 o'clock at night. That's like a 5 hour block that I have to schedule. And I need to make sure, okay, let my wife know, like, hey, Benjamin and I are heading out to soccer and we're not going to be around. So we have to do other stuff, schedule time other ways around family time that we want to do. So again, it just goes back to like, look, I'm ambitious. I've got a lot of things I want to do in my work life, my personal life, on my races. And in order to get all of these done and not feel like I'm always running late, got to be able to schedule everything. So let's turn this into and talk about work scheduling, on schedule everything. So I've talked about common examples when it comes to just planning and preparing. And this leads really well into this idea of schedule everything. The first thing is just like on the sales front. Like if you are a salesperson, of course, this is important. If you're a company founder that's doing a lot of the selling, then you've got to block time for your prospecting. And like I like literally have to tell clients all the time. And even after I tell them, they're very slow to do this, which is blocking time for your prospecting. Like you have to schedule the time to do your prospecting. Like I tell people, you got to be doing at least 2 90-minute blocks every single week. And this is where you're going in, you're doing account research, you're mapping out accounts, you're finding people on LinkedIn, you're sending them messages, you're sending follow-up emails, you're drafting up sequences, sending them out, making phone calls. Like you have to do that outreach. You absolutely have to do the outreach. And if you don't do the outreach, you're not going to fill the top of the sales funnel. This is just like, this is a law in sales. And oftentimes I find when people are like, oh, I'm really busy this week because I have to prepare for this meeting or I have to do this travel or we have this product sprint or we're doing this new product release or whatever the other things are that take over the schedule, weeks go by and there hasn't been any prospecting that's getting done because they're like, oh, it's okay because I'm going to a conference in 6 weeks and we're going to run a booth and I'm going to beat badges. Like, yeah, that's okay, but it can't just be this big bump in activity and hope that that one conference is going to fill your sales funnel for the next quarter, the next 2 quarters, right? You have to schedule the time to do your prospecting. You just have to. So that's one thing that I'm very religious on in terms of like blocking out time for those kinds of activities. It's a meeting with myself. And it should be a meeting with yourself to say, at this time is when I'm going to do my prospecting. The same goes with account work. So, for example, with me, a lot of the work that I'm doing is on behalf of clients or with clients. And so that might mean doing account work, might include doing an internal stand up to make sure that everyone's clear on what's happening with certain deals in the pipeline. So, like the kind of work that I'm doing with clients and helping clients with, oftentimes it's large enterprise sales. So, if you're selling to, say, a large bank like JP Morgan Chase or Wells Fargo or HSBC or Bank of America, you're going to be dealing with multiple decision makers. You might have multiple sales opportunities. I've got one client that has 3 to 4 sales opportunities per large account because of the size and scope of those accounts. You have different business divisions that might all want to buy your product for different reasons. And so you're working multiple deals across multiple business units with multiple contacts. Now, sometimes those contacts overlap and sometimes they don't. And then on your side, you might have multiple people that are doing calls or doing interactions with those customers. It might be you, the founder, that might be leading the charge with the key points of contact over there. But then you might also have an engineer or a product person that's helping you. You might have a business development person that's helping you or an account executive. You might start bringing in a customer success person in later stages. You're going to have a co-founder, a CTO that's going to come into some sales calls. So you've got to communicate. You've got to coordinate across those accounts of who's doing what and when. What are the KPIs and key results on that account over the next month, the next 3 months to make sure we're making progress on this 9-month enterprise deal that could be a $500,000 contract, right? So planning the time, scheduling the time to do these internal stand-ups If you've got 5 to 10 significant large deals in your pipeline, now you've got to do that account planning call like every 2 weeks. So if those are 30-minute meetings with 10 deals, that's 6 hours, if I'm not mistaken, or 10 deals times, so 5 hours of meetings every 2 weeks just to make sure that everybody's communicating and coordinating. Yes, you can use Slack, and yes, you can have project management platforms in order to manage stuff. But at the end of the day, you've got to do these live stand-ups. You've got to schedule that time to do it. And so it's really, really important. It's easy to, oh, you'll just do a Slack message, or, oh, we'll just catch up on the phone real quick. But oftentimes those things don't happen, and they're not executed very well. The third thing, at least for me, what I have to do when it comes to schedule everything is things like content production. So this podcast is not a trivial amount of time for me. So one, I have to sketch out the content that I want to type, that I want to share with you and structure it. That usually takes me anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes just to get my ideas down on paper. Then I need to rewrite those notes into a cohesive, legible format that I'm reading from right now. Then I've got to record this podcast, and then we got to get off to production. And then I have to write a blog post or a LinkedIn post that's going to promote this. So it's a lot of time. It's 3 to 4 hours per episode that I'm spending and investing to make sure this gets out to people like you that are listening, right? So I've got to make sure to schedule that time, which is why I'm recording this episode at 5:30 in the morning in a hotel in Palo Alto, because this is the time that I had blocked in order to do it. And in order to have this time block available, I drove down to Palo Alto last night instead of driving in the morning. I could have made this a day trip and say, oh, I'm just going to drive down in the morning. It's a 2-hour drive in the morning, leave at 4 in the morning, or leave at 5 in the morning, get down to Palo Alto, work in a coffee shop for a couple hours, and then do the workshop and then drive home. But what that doesn't do is give me the time to do this podcast. My time in the morning is more productive than my time in the evening. So that time, scheduling that time for myself to drive down at night after soccer practice from 7 to 9 p.m. to get down here, that time is less expensive for me, in the sense that 7 to 9 p.m. is not productive time. Of course, I'm going to miss being at home for that evening. But the upside of me scheduling and getting a hotel and driving down at night is now I have this time block available. And that comes only because I have scheduled this time, and I'm scheduling everything on my calendar. The same goes with other content. So later this week, I'm running a live training for the clients in our coaching program. We run a live training every month on a key activity or a key part of the sales process. This month, it's around like how to run your big meetings, your big demos. So while I have content that I've developed over the years, I've got to structure that. I've got to organize a presentation. I've got to get a workbook together so that my assistant can get that out to all of the teams. All of that content takes time. It takes multiple hours for me to craft that and get it into a presentation. I've got to schedule that time around my content production. So if I don't have those time blocks set up, it will not get done, right? So for me, it's scheduling the time to do top of funnel stuff. It's scheduling time to spend time with clients. It's scheduling time to do internal stand-ups and meetings. It's scheduling time to do content. So a lot of things. I'm very ambitious around the business. I'm very ambitious about what I want for clients, very ambitious about what I want for myself. So scheduling everything is the only way that I can get everything done. All right, let's wrap up here with 5 strategies I've got to help you schedule everything. How do you do more, be happy, and surprise yourself? How do you go farther? Schedule everything. Here we go. Strategy number 1. This is something I learned from a guy named Dan Sullivan. So Dan Sullivan is a business coach. He runs a program called Strategic Coach. I was a part of that program for about 1.5 years, many years ago. And one of the biggest learnings I had from Dan and Strategic Coach was this concept of running an activity inventory. So the concept here that he shares is that take your calendar, go back about a month, and go week by week, day by day, and look at every single thing that you're doing, every task, every meeting, every activity. That includes not just the meetings you're having, but it includes like, hey, how much time did you spend doing email? How much time did you spend setting up a meeting? How much time did you spend confirming a meeting? How much time did you spend getting prepared with presentation slides? What about your internal meetings? What about the marketing work you're doing, the sales work that you're doing, the product work that you're doing? Basically run an entire inventory down to 10-minute increments of where are you spending your time. And then after you've done that inventory of all your activities, then he said label it in a scale of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1 is the stuff that you don't like to do, and you're not good at doing. So for me, when I was first starting my business, the things I don't like to do and I wasn't good at doing is anything related to the website, anything related to technical stuff. I was horrible at it and I didn't like doing it. Then look at the number twos are the things that you don't like to do, but you're competent at doing it. So, it might be things like scheduling meetings. Like you can be competent at scheduling meetings, but if you're scheduling a lot of meetings every week, it's kind of a waste of time. It's not something you'd like to do. So that would be the second level. The third, the number threes are things you enjoy to do and things you enjoy doing and you're good at it. So for me, it could be something like, setting up content for a podcast or setting up content for a live training. And then the last thing, number four, is what he calls your genius zone. These are the things that when you are doing these things, you are lost in time. This is like what he calls your genius zone. So for me, my genius zone is when I'm actually running a workshop and teaching a workshop, when I'm writing for a book or writing for a blog post. That's where I could spend 2 hours working on a single blog post. And then I kind of look at the clock and like, wow, I just spent 2 hours working on a blog post. Or if I'm running a day-long workshop, once I get in front of the room from 9 to 5, like the minutes and the hours, it's just flow state for me. And what's interesting about this activity inventory, which holds true for nearly everyone, is that most of us are spending 80 to 90% of our time doing ones and twos, things we don't like doing and things we're either not good at or we're competent at, but we don't enjoy. And so when it comes to scheduling everything, you need to figure out like, where are you spending your time? Because if you're not spending your time on the highest value activities and the things you enjoy, then you're never really going to be able to push your business, push your life forward. So the first recommendation for me, just do that activity inventory and make sure you know as a starting point, where are you spending your time so that you can start to schedule more of the things that is critical for you to do as a business owner or things that are critical for you on the personal front that are important to you, and then find ways to get other people to help you with the things that aren't critical or the things that you don't enjoy doing or you're not good at doing. That's why I have a fabulous team around me at Sales Quality. That's why Serena is so wonderful as an executive assistant, because she takes all of the things that I don't like to do and I'm not good at doing and takes it off my plate and does them in an excellent level of work. The second that I think about from a strategy standpoint is we're all familiar with this concept of like rocks, pebbles, sand. Take a jar. If you want to get everything to fit in the jar, you put the rocks in first, then the pebbles, then you pour in the sand. I actually take it a little bit little bit farther, where I'd say first it's your mountains. What are the mountains that you want to climb? What are the big things, the big projects, the big initiatives that you got for yourself or your business over the next year? What are the big mountains you want to climb? You got to know what those mountains are. Then what are the boulders? You're looking at that mountain and you want to climb up that mountain. You can see the jagged edges, or you can see the rocks, or you can see the path. You're like, what are the big boulders I'm going to have to overcome? Then it's the rocks, then it's the pebbles, then it's the sand, and then it's the water, because there's still space between the sand. How do you fill all of that in? And so I think it's really important for us to, first of all, get really clear, like, what are the mountains that we're trying to climb? What are the top 3 projects, top 5 projects this year? Because we don't have clarity on what we're trying to overcome. What are the things that we want to do? Then scheduling our time every day doesn't really matter. That's when you end up focusing on your busyness, not your business. You're not working on your objectives, your key objectives. Instead, you're just doing stuff that gets you a full calendar and gets you efficient, but it doesn't mean that you're productive. Being efficient is not the same as being productive, right? So think about the mountains, boulders, rocks, pebbles, sand, water, and make sure you're super clear about where you want to go and what those big things that you want to climb and overcome. Because if you don't do those things, then scheduling everything will be less productive. Okay. Third thing for me in my calendar, I color code everything, right? So one of the things I color code, for example, in my calendar, I put everything, there's a little caveat to just color coding, but I schedule everything in my work calendar. That's the place where I live. That includes all of my personal stuff, including soccer games, soccer practices, jiu-jitsu class, training that I'm doing. All of those things are scheduled in purple. So big blocks of time. A lot of times around nights and weekends, lots of stuff filled in with purple. Occasionally during the day, I'm going to take a midday break to go for a run. That goes as purple in the middle of the day from, say, noon to 1. Okay, I'm going to do a 5-mile run, have my stuff ready, jump out the back door, do a 5-mile run, get back in time for my 1 o'clock meeting. Those things are in purple. Then I have a dark blue shade I use for things that what I call home duties. So if I am responsible for breakfast and taking my son to school, are picking them up. Those are home duties. I put those into the calendar as well. Those things are scheduled 7:15 to 8:30, home duties, breakfast, get my son going, get him to school, and get back to my home office. Picking up in the afternoon, dentist appointments, doctor's appointments, those kinds of things. All those home duties that need to be done, those all go into the calendar as well. Then I've got a color for green. So my green colors are everything I'm doing with clients or everything I'm doing for clients. It's green because that's how we make money. So I want to see a lot of green on that calendar to make sure that I am delivering value and thus continuing to earn cash for the business. And so those are, coaching calls I'm doing with clients. Those are live trainings I'm running. If I'm actually doing calls, I have a couple of embedded consulting engagements right now. So I'm actually running calls with their customers on behalf of those clients. So those are green. Internal meetings I'm doing with them, those are all green. So that's like client related time. Those are client coaching consulting time is green. My orange time is my sales time. So sales time on behalf of Sales Qualia. If I'm talking to founders about our program or talking to them about consulting engagements, that's my sales time. I've got a bright orange, which is my content time. So if you look at my calendar, it's very colorful. And some weeks it might be heavy purple because I got a lot of personal stuff going on. Or some weeks it might be heavy green because I got a lot of client things going on. Sometimes it might be heavier on the content delivery side. So what I'm looking to do is balance my days, balance my weeks, and making sure that it's visually I understand what kind of day or week am I going to be having. And this leads into strategy number 4, which is then time tracking. So once it's in your calendar, that's your plan. But then the second thing I then do is time track. I use an app called Harvest, and Harvest allows you to set up projects and then categories and subcategories. So as I'm completing a day, I will go back and see, okay, how much time did I spend with this one client on sales calls? Did I spend time with this one client doing one-on-ones? Did I spend time with this one client doing meeting prep? And add these subcategories so I can see how much time am I spending with that client on a daily, weekly basis, and what are the things I'm doing on behalf of that client or with that client, so that I can almost itemize where I'm spending that time. Same thing with my own business at Sales Quality. So how much time am I spending on coaching stuff? How much time on sales? How much time on marketing? How much time on content? So that again, every week, every month, I have these logs, and over time, I can do retros and see, am I spending the appropriate amount of time on each of those key activities, which moves the business forward. So time tracking everything allows me to then figure out where I need to spend more time, where if I'm not spending enough time, say on top of funnel stuff in my business, or maybe I'm spending more time than I committed to spending with a client, in which case I got to go to the client and say, look, we agreed to certain outcomes, certain objectives. Seems like this thing is adding up to a little bit more. So we need to adjust the engagement a little bit. And here's the evidence that, here's the extra work that we've been putting in over the last couple of weeks. So it allows you to go to those customers and ask for more if you deserve to get more. And then the last thing I do is add buffers. I'm adding buffers. So in addition to the actual activities, if I am, for example, this workshop I'm running today in Palo Alto, workshop runs from 10 to 12. Yes, I have 10 to 12 blocked off because that group sent me the meeting invite, but I'm also blocking off 30 minutes to get there early to do a tech check, to make sure that the iPad works with the screen, to make sure that they've got the room set up the way that we want. So I'm adding those buffers. I'm adding a buffer to go drive over there. It's a 7-minute drive, but it's not just 7 minutes. It's getting out of the hotel. It's packing my stuff in the truck. It's getting checked out and then driving over there and parking into the parking garage and then walking over to the venue. So even though it's only 7 minutes to drive, it's actually like 30 minutes of time to get from where I am to where I'm going to be in the room to do the tech check. So all of those things is actually an hour's worth of time. So when you look at it that way and you schedule that time in, you realize like, okay, yes, I'm in a hotel that's 7 minutes away and the workshop starts at 10. But if I don't schedule that time, it's easy for me to go at 9:45, I'm going to drive over there. Well, if I drive over at 9:45, there's no way I'm going to get there and be ready to go at 10 a.m. So it's really, really important to add these buffers both before, but also after your meetings, after your events, because sometimes meetings go long. Sometimes you need a little downtime. Sometimes you need a little bio break. I can't tell you how many times that I've been a little too aggressive with my scheduling and I've done meeting after meeting after meeting. I've done 3 meetings in a row that are an hour each. And then I realized like, man, I've been drinking a ton of water. I could sure use a break right now, or I could sure use 5 minutes to go get a power bar. or, a handful of almonds or an apple or something because I'm starving because it's now 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I haven't eaten anything since breakfast. And like literally, these are things that you have to schedule. If you don't schedule it, you're going to be very unkind to yourself, right? So those are my strategies. Number one, activity inventory. Number two, make sure you know your mountains and your boulders, not just your rocks, pebbles, and sand and water. Number three, color code your calendar. Number four, time track. And number five, make sure you're adding those buffers. And if you do all of those things, it will definitely mean that you are scheduling everything. It will also help you to do more, be happy, and surprise yourself. It will help you to go farther. Thanks for listening.